So welcome everybody to the Astrology Squad. We're here to give you the astrological inside track on newsmakers, celebrities, and historical figures. And by doing so, we hope to teach you about the planets and the zodiac signs so you can learn more about your horoscope, as well as what astrology can and cannot offer. My name is Frank Clifford. I'm a full-time astrologer, writer, and teacher. I run the London School of Astrology, which offers courses online and in London. And I'm here with my very eminent co-host, Richard Swatton. Hi, Richard.
I'll take eminence anytime. Thank you very much, Frank. Let's see if I can live up to the expectations of that word. I am a professional astrologer and psychotherapist. Psychotherapy is my main thing, but I see people for consultations. I do horary astrology, and I've been studying astrology since 1978. I was taught by a theosophist early on, so I went through the ranks of traditional astrology, and then eventually went to Liz Green's Center for Psychological Astrology, and then eventually changed over after the influence of that, changed over to become a psychotherapist, having a thorough 10-year Jungian analysis and the rest of it. But astrology has always been part of it, and Frank has been very kind to say that he's going to publish my book on horary, as it's been on the shelves for a long time, but I'm near the end of it now. So I'm looking forward to today, especially Jordan Peterson, which I admire greatly, and I look forward to what you have to say, Frank. Actually.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Richard. Richard, you've also got a YouTube channel that you've recorded different videos on over the year. You're coming back to that later.
Yes.
And also teach for the LSA. So it's great to have you, and it's always great to have your insight. Now, with Jordan Peterson, we've just released a video on David Icke, and I always have a lot of respect for people who are professionals, people who are academics, who are open to astrology. I know Jordan is, and David Icke certainly has been. And that it's not that they like my subject, it's the fact that they're open to the fact that the world can be seen in many different ways through many different lenses. And when I hear somebody like Brian Cox or somebody else dismiss astrology, I always really want to say, study it first, before you have an opinion on something. So I'm very happy that both Jordan Peterson and David Icke that we looked at recently both of them are open to a subject like ours. It just gives me faith that people are still willing to be open to subjects. Do you find that, Richard?
Yes, I think Jordan Peterson has such a broad spectrum and such a broad scope that he also understands the limits of rational comprehension. And so therefore he was a big fan of mythology and exploring patterns of archetypes that he saw in Jung through, and he believes that you see that knowledge can be gained, unlike Sam Harris. And Sam Harris and Brian Cox and those people that say it's a load of nonsense. And of course, what they do in saying it's a load of nonsense is not understand the very basis upon its practice. They do not understand that, and I did 3 videos on this, that it's about Marsilio Ficino and the use of the imagination upon image and allowing image and symbol to speak. You see? And so Jordan Peterson has that. He has a broad spectrum, and he also has a broad spectrum knowledge, an incredible amount of knowledge, extremely well read, from which to draw upon. He also realizes the limits of his own rationality. And so therefore he gives room for that. And when he was at the London O2 Arena and had a discussion with Sam Harris, and it was a marvelous discussion, there was a section on astrology, which he talked about as the possibility of utilizing it to access information, let's say, from other parts of the brain or other parts of the mind that speak in images and symbols. And so for me, the very basis of astrology is an active use of the of imagination, but it's it's structured through the symbolic system that we've come to know, and that the tradition, so that Sun is in Gemini, that means a particular thing, and we have to know the language, but afterwards we're riffing on it. We're seeing there are basic understandings of the astrology, but once that's rather like music. Once you've got all the bits and pieces and the sharps and flats and the arpeggios, and you can do all this, then you put it together in a performance, a creative interpretation. You could say that it's an instant way of divining a symbol, divining an image. Every astrologer has a different take every time it comes to it. So therefore it's exciting. It's creative interpretation with imagination, and rationality is simply there to bring a picture around these things. So it is a science of imagination. And I think, and it's built upon that. And there are Neoplatonic theories and Renaissance theories that when you engage the imagination, something strange happens in the mind. Coleridge had this. Coleridge talks about the primary imagination and the secondary imagination and fancy. He had a whole theory of the imagination. And secondary imagination is speculation and observation on the symbol, and something happens in the mind to call upon other aspects of the mind to interpret. That could be called divination, or divination on it. Now, if you're steeped in psychology, then you naturally, the symbols will speak through your what you understand about psychology. If you're a humanist, as you do, about using these symbols practically in the life of people, to help them on, to guide them and so on, that's what you do. A lot of astrologers do that. So I'm sorry this is a long introduction to that, but that is the very basis of astrology. And I think Peterson understood this, said this to Sam Harris in the thing, and said, yes, I don't understand it, but I think there's a strong basis for seeing that it is not nonsense. And he said this in public on a stage in front of thousands of people. So he is an open-minded, classic Gemini, open-minded, right? Mind being with Gemini and so on. The Gemini's basic trend in life, basic thing, is to find a structure of understanding so that then you can understand life better. That's it. That's what Gemini, it finds connections, it has words, it engages theories, it's involved in education, all of those stuff that we know about Gemini, the twins, the communication between the left and the right, or different levels of reality. And his scope is so broad. It's absolutely amazing. Look at the Jupiter square to the Mercury.
Yes.
And Jupiter being in the sign of everything, an emotional desire to know everything, to be everything, to suffuse yourself. You see, so that Jupiter with Mercury is a supreme advance of knowledge. And he probably wanted to read everything. He probably spent 20 years reading everything that he could. You see, it's a very powerful pull. And as you know, in psychological astrology, we see planets as needs to be fulfilled, or patterns to be fulfilled. And Mercury needs to know everything. He is extremely well read. Yes, he's an academic, but he's also a clinical psychologist that applies his knowledge. Typical of a Taurus ascendant. How can this be practical? How can this be useful? We were going to do the Queen, weren't we? With Taurus, but with respect to her and her passing, we decided not to. But, look at all the words they're using about the Queen. Enduring, a permanent reign, dutiful, unmoving, unswerving, unchanging, absolutely convinced of her substance and her purpose and her meaning. Yes. I think Boris Johnson called her the pole star. So when you get a Taurus, you get all these qualities coming out in the identity, saying, how can we be practical? So this isn't just a theoretical psychologist, not just an academic, but a person that I believe is eminently practical if you listen to what he has to say. Another thing that I admired about, and I've seen all his lectures, sometimes several times, that here is a generous person. Just imagine giving a $70,000 course free on the internet to everyone. several times over. You can watch his Harvard University lectures. You can watch Toronto lectures, Maps of Meaning, on Nietzsche and Jung and everything else. And it is enlightening, it's generous, and extremely informative. So I like Jordan Peterson a lot, as you can probably see. And I've already done 3 videos on my channel about specific aspects in the chart, particularly the Mars-Neptune, because he talked in his early days about Marduk and Tiamat, chaos and order. So when we come to look at Saturn and the Neptune, do you see the Saturn, Neptune, Mars? Mars was the Marduk, piercing Tiamat order, yes, in order to prevent chaos running the world. So in his horoscope, literally in his horoscope, the themes that he's talking about, particularly Saturn in Aquarius, about social fascism, about communism, about he's a social theorist as well as a clinical psychologist. It's all here, remarkably. So I've done 3 videos already on specific aspects. And also, unfortunately, when I mentioned this, when Neptune went over his sun, I did predict that he would have to retire. And of course, he had a benzodiazepine addiction, classic of the Neptune, opiates, benzodiazepines. And he had to withdraw for a couple of years, and he went through an extremely difficult time. And it's absolutely wonderful to see him back communicating, fighting the good fight against irrationality. And typical Sun Uranus. Sorry, I took a lot of time there, but it suddenly all came out in a burst.
That's wonderful. And I know he's communicating in a world full of social media, and where people are cancelled, and he takes a lot of flack. I know he's also said some provocative things recently about image and body image, and it's an interesting time. He gets often put in the category where he's just here to try and, or people say he's just here to try and empower young men. And I think we can see that in the Mars-Neptune, where there's that sense of Mars-Neptune. If you read in certain astrology books, it talks about a weak male self-image. It speaks, but to me, it's always spoken of somebody that's able to fulfill the dream or put energy into making things happen. Yes. And I think the Mars-Neptune for him is inspiring people to follow what they're here to do, or to reclaim the power within. It's been, as I say, it's been thrown on him a few times that that's all he's here is to help empower weak men, or men that have lost their roles. What's your take on that, Richard?
Well, when you hear him talk, especially in the early days in the lecture, he talks a lot about chaos and order, and reinterprets often a lot of the Bible. So chaos, or the diminishment of the ego, those forces in life which don't want separateness, which don't want distinctness. We all have these drives, Neptunian drives, to loosen the ego's bonds. It can be seen in sexuality, or drug taking, or religious devotion, mysticism, all of those things that surround this Neptunian content. But so he saw that as Tiamat, the goddess of chaos, if you like, or the primordial waters from which we arose. Opposing that is the belligerent, punchy, self-assertion of his own will. He does it. He bases all of the stuff he does is based on fact. Very Taurian, very punchy, and rather belligerent sometimes. I think this is partly the downfall, because he can be very Mars-Saturn. He wants to control, but you can always sense a sense of a volcano underneath waiting to go off when people attempt to destroy him. So he can be very strong in his opinions, very powerful, but what are you going to do against the forces of chaos and victimization that Neptune there? So all in his speeches we can see this, but he has a soft side. And he's had to have that soft side shown out, that he's as vulnerable to all of these things as it's quite a difficult aspect. So between Saturn and Neptune, he has tried to find a way of intellectually making religion or religious thought or spiritual quests into a legitimate goal. It's always been difficult for him because, once he was talking about the possibility of God and all that, and as you can see the changes, he now believes in a divinity of some kind. I don't think he's converted, but there is always this tension between what you know and a kind of mystical connection to what you know. You see, Saturn is the ring past knot of the ego. You can't go past that. So you need Neptunian means, myth and so on, or religious devotion or spiritual practices to get you in touch with realms beyond the ego. That's Neptune. But he's often a strict rationalist. But he's found that the impulses of religious experience have driven people to the most amazing things. So a frustrated man probably started off as an alcoholic or too much drink, Mars, Neptune. And I think at age 21, it's very interesting this, at age 21, he had a dream, Frank. And the dream was a vision of Christ on the cross surrounded by a serpent. And the serpents are obviously Scorpio. And the 21, as we know, is when Saturn would have been exactly on that Neptune. And he had a dream of that image. And that image enabled him to give up drinking and to try and find what it is about in the Christian religion through symbolism, through Jung and everything else. So sorry to, again, grab the stuff, but I've studied a lot of Peterson, listened to a lot of him, and he lives his chart.
You were talking about the strong rationality that we see in the Gemini, both Sun and Mercury, and even in the Moon in Libra, and the grand trine with Saturn, the air grand trine, which Noel Till would talk about it being a very self-contained of this is what I know.
Intellectual self-sufficiency would be his phrase.
That's it. That's the expression he used. And also you mentioned the Taurus, the needing the facts, needing the information.
Oh, yeah.
The recent Neptune square Sun transit that you were referring to, and Pluto going over the MC. Do you feel that was a much needed overwhelm or surge of Neptune to get him realigned in some way? Have you seen it since?
I do. I think this is not a criticism. How can one criticism a mind and a person of this stature? But I think that he overvalued the power of intellect and insight, classic of a Saturn in Aquarius. If you reveal the truth about things, people will, truth, Aquarius, and you base it on fact, people will naturally follow and come to the same conclusions as he does, because he can see it and he can explain it. But what he has come across is a resistance in the collective to intellectual understanding, no matter how articulate, and he is articulate to a degree. And look at this wonderful, strong, powerful grand trine in air. His intellect knows no bounds. His moon, he's emotionally involved with it. He's instructional, helpful with the Saturn. Mercury in Gemini likes a lot of detail, makes connections between this level and that level. But I feel that he needed this downfall, but downfall is the wrong word, scrap that. He needed this breakthrough. His wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. His daughter was, had overcome a great deal of things to do with food and her body, and he suffered from benzodiazepine withdrawal. And I think he needed to feel his own cross, because he was always saying to people, you must suffer your own cross. Yes, suffer your own cross. Life is suffering, and you need to find something within yourself to tackle that. Self-respect, facts, whatever it is, to tackle it. I'm not sure his information is just for men, but it has appealed to a lot of men to not back down in their archetypal masculine identity. Eugene Monique talked about this way back in the 80s, and he produced a book called Phallos, which is the archetype of the male. And then his second book, Castration and Male Rage, was about the cutting down of Phallos that he started to see. I think a lot of people have confused hierarchy with a problem, but let's not get to that. So I think he's doing a fine job in doing that. And I think that the Neptune and the Pluto needed to take him into an emotional experience where he was on an edge. And whether his rationality and his understanding could take him through that. And I don't think it could. And I think within that, he found a resource, a redemptive resource in his life that he'd been talking about for a long time, but really hadn't accepted. And he's accepted a divinity of a kind slowly and over time, because that Taurus and that Gemini doesn't like to be fooled by anything. It doesn't entertain those kind of things, but he's been forced to. And I think that's the positive side of this Neptune, that no matter how much you know, there's always stuff that you don't, but there are resources beyond you which you can call upon in your life, which are not rational, but they're above or supersede rationality. And I think he now knows that.
So it's been a metamorphosis then in a Pluto way, and a sort of maybe being submerged in a Neptune way, in something coming out. It's so interesting that that Neptune through Pisces, because when it hits the Gemini, it is really challenging everything that feels rational, everything. It's challenging the instinctive need to question. And with Neptune, the answers are not always there, or they are infinite. And Gemini says, I'll be in two places. And Neptune says there are a million times two places to be in, perhaps. So it's an interesting double whammy that he's had. As Pluto moves into Aquarius in 2023, and properly in 2024 for a number of years, inching towards that Saturn, I wonder whether he'll be looking to create an institution, looking to create something for the future in terms of study, perhaps. You know, we're all online now, but maybe there's something else he's already considering. But we are entering a very rational age again.
Yeah.
In ways, with Pluto moving into Aquarius, and hopefully the embracing of the very best of Aquarius, which is always the sense of we have many opinions, many ideas, many identities, without it being just the only way. But the shadow side of that, of course, is the canceling, this whole process of being on social media, everyone having a fair go at things, but also the unwillingness to keep a conversation going. So maybe the Pluto and Aquarius will be struggling with that for all of us. But
I think you've come up, for me, in our discussion today, with the best phrase of all, connecting around Sun. It was so simple, but so beautiful. You said the instinct to ask questions. That is behind the Gemini, the inquiring mind, the curiosity of mind, the entertaining of what other people have written and spoken and have said. And he's open and broad. We come in with that open-mindedness. But I think the Sun in there, the life force itself, is focused through the spectrum of the mind and understanding. And that instinct to ask questions is about curiosity. Curiosity, ask yourself the right questions. I don't think that'll ever go. But I'm not so sure if, when people go through Pluto transits, as he has, if they absorb the meaning of them, then the next Pluto transit doesn't have to be tearing down. But Pluto Saturn, I'm going through Pluto Saturn at the moment. It's not too bad, but I do see the certain structures of my identity are changing. Certain things are coming out of me, and there's less resistance to to change, and for me to be seen, if you like, more. And Saturn is the defensive structure of the system. Whenever it's challenged, there are breakthroughs or breakdowns. Now, if you've taken the lesson of the previous transit, then that Pluto transit could be the pinnacle of his career in opening a worldwide university on the internet. A Saturn instructional worldwide university with some of the best minds that he will know. If he succeeds, that will be absolutely brilliant. But there are forces of Pluto, which we're talking about David Icke previously, and there are forces which don't want the truth, which seek to bring it down. And this is what happened in Trump's horoscope, was that Pluto was opposed to Saturn in his attempt for the second return. And I questioned in my little talks. I said, well, I don't know whether he can overcome that. There needs to be something, because he could get a bit arrogant and a bit all of that business. Something pulled him down, but he's back. And I hope that this Pluto on his Saturn will be a consolidation, almost, because he's a world figure now, that Aquarius will take his personal life, what he is doing has effect in the larger collective. So I don't know. I think the thing is out on that. It comes in 2029, 2030. So we're up ahead of that. But that's what I hope that Saturn will be, a pinnacle of his career being in the 10th.
Well, what's interesting as well is that what you referred to just now, if you allow the Pluto transit to be a humbling experience, to recognize how little you know or how little you can affect. There's a whole range of things with Pluto. As you say, the next Pluto transit doesn't have to be so seismic. It doesn't have to create such an earthquake in one's life, perhaps, or doesn't, or should we say, coincide with that. So I think watching the video that Jordan Peterson gave after the battle that he had, it was a very humbling experience for him, and he was didn't have the Trump-like arrogance of that you realize that Jordan Peterson had been through something profoundly effective or profoundly moving for him. So
this is what sorry, so it's just triggered off something. This is what Ken Wilber, probably the greatest transpersonal theorist and of the 20th century, things have started to supersede him, but he was asked in an interview, I think it was Rebel Wisdom. I look on these kind of things. I think Rebel Wisdom's a pretty good channel. And Ken Wilber has nothing but admiration. He's an Aquarius. He has 5 planets in air signs. I mean, he's another a kind of egghead, I suppose you could, but actually he's a marvelous person, full of meditational experience over many years on practices of Tibetan Buddhism and Zen Buddhism and all of that. So what my thing was that I don't think Peterson had actually engaged a spiritual practice. Yes, I think he undertook some drug experiences and so on, but those give you a hint at it. Spiritual practice actually involves you with the bringing down or the realization of worlds beyond ego, different capacities of consciousness which broaden beyond the known, beyond what the mind and rationality can give you. So moving beyond the enlightenment. And so my feeling was then, as it is now, that he's engaged. He to engage in a spiritual practice would be to inculcate, to cultivate awarenesses of other dimensions of consciousness other than the rational. And I think he's been forced to do so, accept it. And also, I think what he's learned is that he's not in control. I think Saturn loves control. I think Taurus loves control. You know, look at that Saturn Mars nobody's going to get me down. It's this kind of, fighting against all those forces, it's very, very powerful. And in many ways, his life of education and understanding has been a compensatory experience for weakness. That's what we see in the psychological realm, but I don't want to go too into that. And that Saturn Neptune, he could have dissolved into nothing, into alcoholism or whatever, had he not taken control. So he has a slightly belligerent attitude, a strong fortitude in his mind, but that's right. He's well practiced. So what I would say about that is to engage in a real meditative, spiritual practice, contemplative prayer. He even says to people, well, at one time he wouldn't have gone to church. But Rupert Sheldrake is saying about this, where else can we have a place in which to go to celebrate something greater than yourself, to join in worship or praise or song as a community? That's good. That's very Aquarian. And so he's even now saying, go to those places, go to your temples, enjoy the experience, because there's something in it, the other than what we're being delivered on the news or on films or, the peripheral of much of today's so-called entertainment.
Interestingly, he's battling the very superficial aspects of Gemini, being on your phone, making a comment, tweeting. In that sense, after the Neptune transit, he's come through saying, explore, question. Gemini is also the great doubter as well, isn't it, of the zodiac? Doubt everything, question everything, explore the possibilities. And now I guess we're hearing the Jupiter in Pisces, but also the Neptune transit saying you can gain something from everything, any experience that you have. But I imagine he's also saying question it, doubt it, but experience it, see what it gives you, and question that experience too.
Oh, absolutely. And I see a lovely link between that trine, Mercury in Gemini, which is open-mindedness at its best, and the Saturn in Aquarius, which seeks to hold, because it's a fixed sign, seeks to hold a theory in which you can understand everything and control the world. And I think that dialogue between them, Mercury says, remain open, question everything. There's more stuff to learn. And Saturn in Aquarius wants to crystallize it, wants to make a theory of everything. But those two are constantly kind of the fixity and the flexibility have been in him. You see, I think of what he was. It reminds me of some of my own searches, that when I was younger, I, read Freud, read Jung, read the existentialists, object relation theories. I was mad on psychology, and I went through the whole lot, and with aplomb, in order to find a theory. And it was the same with my astrology. And I did that. I said a little bit of that in Symbol to Substance, that I was looking for a theory about how to interpret astrology, that it was the main one. And so then I studied Radia, and then I studied the horary and theosophical astrology and so on. And then I thought I'd found the alchemical gold when I reached Liz Green, and this was the way to do it. And I still, of course, tremendous. Liz Green is, to me, a tremendous influence on my life. Took me into psychoanalysis of the Jungian kind, and a lot of reading, and some of the methods of psychological analysis I still use. But what I found was eventually that astrology was a creative element, and that you could interpret it in different ways, and there was no set system of interpretation which applied to everybody. And Saturn in Aquarius, or my Aquarian Jupiter in Aquarius, wants that, looking for knowledge of everything, and then go, this is the definitive way. And I've found that actually the definitive way, yes, there are great ways to interpret, but you have to be able to use the chart creatively. And that Gemini, I have a Gemini ascendant, happens to be virtually the same degree as Gemini MC, happens to be the same degree as Peterson's sun. I'd love Peterson to talk to Rupert Sheldrake. I'd love Peterson to have an interview with Ken Wilber. I'd love Peterson to have an interview with an astrologer. That would be fun.
Indeed. Well, that's a great place to end it. And I think you probably would love that with the moon in Libra. There's a great need for debate, great need to understand the other and to reflect on other people's opinions, other people's ideas. The great moon, the great reflector in the sign of Libra, to argue, to enjoy the argument.
Absolutely, to enjoy the argument and to have a collegiate, well-mannered, even though an argument was never meant to be a conflict.
No.
Argument was supposed to provide, the synthesis, antithesis, and then the antithesis, and so on, and to provide some kind of sense of movement in the structure of ideas and the theory of ideas. And that moon in Libra is so well placed to do that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Richard, and thanks everyone for watching. You can find us on astrologysquad.com. You can find us on YouTube, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks again, Richard. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. I found that really, really great, really interesting.
Thank you.
See you, Frank.